You know, we have mentioned the Shrine Bowls tonight, NFL Network at 7 o'clock, Senior Bowl practices. There's a feed before we get to Sam Conn. Frankie Abbott. It's at Frankie's Film, like Frankie's IES Film. And there's like an 8-second clip of Jalen Petrie defending a player as a corner or a bump and run where it just pushes the guy down. Jalen Petrie is such a stud from Frankie Abbott. If you haven't seen that today on Twitter, we're now joined by Sam Conn. TheAthletic.com covers college football, Texas with their surge at the end of December, and then also in the transfer portal, plus yesterday, and of course A&M. Sam, your thoughts about Jimbo Fisher yesterday and fighting back a little bit and basically saying enough is enough.
It was interesting, to say the least. I found it to be a little bit much. I understand why he did it, because he doesn't want the perception that they dropped $30 million of NIL money on a signing class. And I get it. And I wrote it today in my column. I think another reason why he did it is because Jimbo Fisher's a competitive SOB, and in particular on the recruiting trail. He wants to be as good or better than Nick Saban, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, any of the guys that are considered the top recruiters in the country. He wants to go toe-to-toe and say that he won with those guys. He cares about it that much. I've seen it, and I wrote this in the piece. I'd seen it in a one-on-one moment with him before in his first year on the job, and so he cares that much. On the flip side, I have no idea, and I don't think any of us have any idea to what degree A&M has used NIL in this class, and could it be a very Hugh Freeze-esque spitting in the wind moment, where he's just kind of daring the NCAA to come look? Perhaps. I have no idea. It could be disingenuous, but even if it is, I think considering the climate that we're in with the NCAA and how hamstrung it is after what happened in the Austin case, I think it's a low risk proposition to do what he did yesterday. I think it united his fan base. Certainly the skeptics have rolled their eyes and will file it away. But overall, I understand why he did it. And it got a lot of attention on top of the attention they have already gotten for landing the number one class in the country.
All you're needed, brother. Sam, your thoughts on A&M's class? I mean, what they were able to do, number one class of all time. I mean, that's kind of saying something right there. So I know expectations are already high. This is a skyrocket them further. Your thoughts on where the Aggies kind of stand with the dust set?
Yeah, it's I mean, you can't beat what they got. I mean, they had 7 5-stars and 17 players in the top 100. I mean, that's unheard of. And to be able to do it all the way to the end, to land 2 top 50 players yesterday in Shamar Stewart and Jacoby Matthews. I mean, this was a start to finish domination. They started all the way back early in the Houston area, getting a lot of big time players. You know, they got Malik Sela and Bobby Taylor out of Katy, Donovan Green out of Dickinson. They got a lot of guys early to start that group. Connor Wegman from Bridgeland, the 5-star quarterback, and then built the momentum off of that. And it's a talented group. They addressed just about every position of need. And I think the question that everybody has now is, okay, when is it going to turn into results on the field? Because A&M has not won at a high level yet. They did come close in 2020 to the college football playoff, finishing 9-1 and being 5th in the college football playoff rankings. But to me, in my mind, this class that they just signed starts the clock that in the next 3 to 4 years, you need to make a serious SEC championship / college football playoff run. Because if you don't, with this class on top of 4 top 8 classes behind it, then what are you doing? So this to me starts the pressure. I think a lot of people already believe is there. To me, it starts now. It's like, this is the group that you should win some kind of title with.
Sam, NIL at $30 million is kind of a weird number to me, in that guys who have that kind of money, sometimes it is. It's just funny money to them and they'll throw it around. But would you pay $30 million to something that isn't proven? What if, even if they were successful, 15 million of that goes on guys who just suck and aren't good? I mean, that's right. Wouldn't you not want to do that? Maybe the promise of, if you play well, it's there, is maybe a little bit more than the actual $30 million figure that's floating out there.
I love how you put that, but it's true because look, you can go back right now to just about anybody's 2018 class and go player by player. And I promise you, in most programs, at least a third of those guys are gone. In many cases, in a lot of programs, half of those guys are gone. Look at Texas's 2019 class. More than half of those guys aren't even on the roster anymore. So yeah, that is a tricky proposition. And that's the thing with NIL is that this being so new and so novel still, I mean, we're not even a full year into it. Businesses and donors and boosters and all that are still figuring out how best to do this and what is the best use of that money. And no, I can promise you, I do not care about anything enough to pay that much money for. I can promise you, there is no player on earth that I would want to go to my alma mater to be willing to fork that kind of money over. It's just, not to say nothing of the fact that, you know, you're putting it in the hands of an 18 to 22-year-old. I guess right now they're 17 or 18 if they sign. But that's just, I know how silly and immature I was at that age. So I don't know that I could be trusted with anything of that sort.
Sam, I think you are working on an investigative piece, aren't you, right now, comparing how much money is being spent in the NIL compared to what it was under the table?
No, not at this moment. But no, I will say that during the offseason, I hope to at least find some answers, particularly at Texas and Texas A&M, as to, you know, Texas has been very public with what they've done with their Clark Field Collective, the $10 million fund, and the Horns with Heart, Pancake Factory initiative. I do hope to get some answers because it's not necessarily trying to probe for something that's, you know, against the rules or whatnot. I think people are just trying to understand what's going on and what is happening in reality in this space. I'm curious to know what is the real world experiences for the athletes, for the coaches, for the programs, for the donors, the boosters, the businesses that contribute this money, and how has it played out. And I hope to spend some of my time this offseason figuring that out at a multitude of schools across the state.
Well, you brought up Texas there, Sam. They finished with another, top ranked recruiting class. That's nothing really new for them, but I think it was what they got in terms of the offensive line. Then you add in the transfers as well, as that goes. And there's reasons for excitement, but there's always been reasons for excitement at Texas every offseason, right? So your thoughts on Steve Sarkisian and the job he did and the changeover he's having with the roster right now?
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, right now they're at 32 new scholarship players. He said that number could go up to 35, 36 if they needed to. He won't necessarily get there unless he feels he finds a couple players that will help them in need positions. But that's more than a third of the roster because when you consider 85 scholarships. So that's a lot of turnover. So I think it's a really good class, obviously a top 5 class. They brought in some really impressive offensive line talent with Devon Campbell signing yesterday, Kelvin Banks, 2 5-star guys. The question I have is how much time is Sarkisian going to get to make this happen? Because the class is fine and bringing in 7 offensive linemen and 8 defensive linemen makes sense, but you can't expect all those guys are going to come in and contribute and build a winning team next year. That's just not realistic. The line of scrimmage is the hardest place as a true freshman to play in college football, and particularly offensive line when you go up against those big, strong defensive linemen. If Texas is thinking they're going to throw 3 true freshman offensive linemen, that seems to me like a sketchy proposition. Certainly, if Banks or Campbell or prove themselves physically ready, Texas A&M did it this year with Bryce Foster and Ruben Fothery, and they had some growing pains for the first quarter of the season and then settled into the role down the second half and started to really play well. But you saw that A&M had a disappointing season. I think you could expect the same if Texas ends up going that route too. But I thought they did a good job. They've got some help for their quarterback, whoever it will be. And they did get a quarterback with Quinn Ewers in the transfer portal. But they got some help for Xavier Worthy. They got some help at tight end in the transfer portal with Billings. They got some help on offensive defensive line where they sorely needed. And they got some really high-end guys late, particularly at corner, guys like Terrence Brooks. So I think did a really good job of reloading talent. Now, as always, as it is with Texas, it's a matter of developing. Can you develop these guys at a high level to help them become a Big 12 championship contending team?
Sam, Quinn Ewers, then would you be floored?
Say that again?
If it's not Quinn Ewers, would you be floored?
No, not at all. Not at all. I would not. If Hudson Card sticks around to compete for this job in the fall camp, I would not be stunned if Hudson Card was a starter on day 1 of September, because Steve Sarkisian is very cognizant of, and I think you probably experienced it with Card to some degree, cognizant of what happens if you rush a guy out there too quick. Card won the job in training camp last year, went out there, started 2 games, and looked like a deer in the headlights against Arkansas. And I don't know what kind of effect did that have on Card's psyche the rest of the year, because whenever he did come back in the game later in the year, didn't look the same, at least that he did against Louisiana in the opener. So I think Sark has worked with so many great quarterbacks over the years. I think he's very aware of how you have to handle that. And the other thing is there's just a ton of pressure on Ewers because, again, we talk about NIL, the money that he got when he left South Lake Carroll to go to Ohio State, the rumored money that Texas, boosters were willing to spend on Ewers when he got to Texas. That's a lot of pressure to put. And I understand he's the number 1 recruit in his class and number 1 quarterback and all that stuff. But that is still to designate him as a savior of the program when he still should technically be a true freshman this year had he not reclassified. That is a lot of pressure. So I would not be shocked if Sark took a methodical approach with him in the fall.
They did have Garrett Gilbert follow Colt McCoy, and he had to play in that championship game. And I thought he's the best high school quarterback I've ever seen. And it set them back because of, we know the story about who they also passed up at times. And so if this doesn't work, it's not like they don't have somebody else in the gun, but that would be, I just wonder about the psyche if he doesn't work out.
Absolutely. No, there's no question about that. It's a great point. I agree with you. I watched Gilbert play at Lake Travis, and I thought he was the best I had ever seen too. And that's one of the big questions for me as someone just as a college football fan in Texas, like, why did that not work out? It never made sense to me why that never worked out for him. But you're right. It did set that program back because of guys that they missed on or didn't take in recruiting, and also guys on their roster that transferred out because Gilbert was on the roster and was going to be the starter. So yeah, if you have to get this one right. So I think you're going to see Sark be patient in the spring, probably try to do his best to ensure that Card does not transfer after the spring, because if Card does transfer before the season, all that's left is Quinn Ewers, who is a redshirt freshman that just transferred from Ohio State, who has 2 snaps, Malik Murphy, true freshman incoming guy from California, who is, by the way, nursing a broken ankle right now that he suffered in his high school state championship game, and Charles Wright, who was a true freshman last year, who didn't see a snap and was behind the walk-on the depth chart. Those are your quarterbacks if Hudson Card leaves. That's not a good position for Texas to be in going into year 2. So I think he's going to do everything he can to try to manage that situation going into August.
Craig, we lost you.
Yeah. All right. Sam, thank you very much. Oh, Craig had a note in the last segment about, we know about the New York Times and all of that, and there's 400 writers, and I love what The Athletic has brought to the table, but I like what you did before that, and Max and others as well. What does that mean to you? Anything at all? Is it status quo? What have you been told?
Yeah, so far everything is still the same. We're still operating as our own company. Obviously, we're under their umbrella, and we had a meeting today actually in a call, and for the foreseeable future, everything is still going to operate as it has. Everything is pretty much the same. Email addresses are the same, all that stuff, how we do our expense reports, everything. So our co-founders are still, leading the way. They're now reporting somebody at the Times, but they Adam Hansman and Alex Mather, who co-founded this company and have done a great job shepherding it. They're still in charge, and they're still leading the way and still trying to have us do our best work and produce the best sports journalism that we can. And I can say I've been 9 months into this job, and I've had more fun doing this in the last 9 months than I've had in the last 5 years covering college football, and particularly being able to do in the state of Texas. So it's been a great experience for me, and I'm looking forward. I'm glad we're at a place that I know values journalism, and I'm glad and excited to see what the future holds for us.
Yeah, we definitely know that feeling. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Sam, I wanted to ask you the question that I missed out on. Houston, Dana Holgorsen in Houston. I mean, they finished with a top 50 class, which is fine. It's whatever. But, man, after the year they had last year, and just it seems like they're kind of under the radar a little bit in terms of their program and their momentum. Would you agree with that?
I think so, yeah, just because, and, Dana is not a very flashy guy. He's pretty no nonsense. He's not going to make you feel warm and fuzzy. He's not going to be the rah-rah guy that goes out there and sells the program in the way that maybe Tom Herman did when Herman was there, when he had the H-Town takeover and all that stuff on social media. but they have quietly had a really good couple of months on the recruiting trail. They finished really strong, signing Matthew Golden, the former TCU commit, Demetrius Hunter from West Orange Stark, the center. They signed a couple highly rated JUCO guys. They got some really underrated guys that I like from the Houston area, guys like Anthony Holmes, defensive tackle from Westfield. And they've got done a lot of work in the transfer portal since then, both in the JUCO routes and from FBS transfers to Power 5 programs. I think they've done a fantastic job. They've closed out this class really, really well. And they're trying to build off that momentum of 12-2, bowl win over Auburn, conference championship game appearance. And, oh, by the way, they're going to the Big 12 in a year. So I think they've done a good job. I think Holgerson's staff, that he's done a really good job of hiring really good recruiters. I think Doug Belk, the defensive coordinator, who's great on-field coach, smart guy, also a heck of a recruiter. Archie McDaniel, the linebackers coach, Brandon Jones, our offensive line coach. All these guys are ones that high school coaches around Texas have told me that have done a fantastic job recruiting their program. So I think they have flown under the radar a little bit, but they have quietly done a really, really good job here in the last couple of months. And I'll be interested to see if they can carry that over into the spring in the 23 class.
Sam, thank you, buddy. Great to have you on. Good luck as you get into that investigative piece on how much they're spending now compared to what they did. I would love to know that, even though I don't think we'll ever know, but that'd be fun. All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys. Y'all take care.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, incredible job covering college football, and we appreciate his access and time and insight as well. We'll have Paul Catalina's top 5 and more